A young reporter thought he could humiliate Clint Eastwood, but he never saw this comeback coming. The ballroom at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel was a spectacle of elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow across the space, their reflections dancing off the gold-trimmed walls. The air was thick with the scent of aged whiskey, expensive perfume, and that ever-present tension that always filled the room when Hollywood's elite gathered under one roof. Guests, dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits, floated from table to table, their voices a controlled murmur of industry gossip, forced laughter, and carefully veiled compliments. Some were here for the cause. Tonight's gala was in support of veterans' mental health initiatives, but for many, it was just another photo op, a chance to be seen, to network, to secure their place in Hollywood's pecking order. And then Clint Eastwood walked in. No entourage. No grand entrance. Just him, dressed in a well-fitted black suit, hands tucked casually in his pockets, exuding that quiet confidence that needed no introduction. At 94 years old, he moved slower than before, but there was still something in his posture, something in the way his eyes scanned the room, that commanded respect. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Eyes flicked toward him. A few guests whispered to their companions. He wasn't the kind of celebrity people gushed over. You acknowledged him. You respected him. He strolled toward a small group near the bar, greeting a couple of longtime friends with a firm handshake before leaning in slightly to catch their conversation over the soft jazz playing in the background. Small talk wasn't his thing, but he had a way of making people feel like what they said mattered, a rare trait in a room like this. Across the ballroom, a young journalist named Brandon Keller was watching. He wasn't exactly a household name, but in the world of political commentary, he was making waves. Known for his bold, no-nonsense takedowns of conservative figures, his articles had earned him a solid social media following. And tonight, he saw an opportunity. To him, Clint Eastwood was a relic, someone from an era that no longer fit Hollywood's narrative. Keller wasn't looking for a conversation. He was looking to make a statement. But the glint of arrogance in his eye, the barely contained excitement on his face, made one thing clear. He had already decided how this confrontation was going to go. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Straightening his tie and grabbing his phone, already set to record, Keller made his way through the crowd. He wasn't nervous. If anything, he was too confident. This wasn't just about challenging an aging actor's outdated views. It was about creating a moment. A viral clip. As he approached, the energy at the bar shifted. A few guests instinctively stepped back, sensing the interruption. Clint Eastwood, in the middle of listening to a war veteran story, barely acknowledged Keller's presence. And that only fueled the young reporter's determination. Clearing his throat, Keller forced a tight-lipped smile. "Mr. Eastwood," he said, just loud enough to turn a few heads. "Brandon Keller, the Sentinel Review. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Eastwood glanced at him, briefly unreadable, then turned back to his conversation. Keller didn't like that. He took a step closer. "I'll make it quick," he added with a forced chuckle. "I just wanted to get her thoughts on Hollywood's changing landscape. You've been in the industry for over 60 years. Do you think people like you still have a place in it?" The jab was intentional. The phrase "people like you" lingered in the air, heavy with implication. Nearby guests turned their attention toward the exchange. Someone set a drink down a little too hard. Even the bartender, mid-pour, hesitated for half a second. Finally, Clint Eastwood looked at him. His gaze was steady, the kind that made a man wonder if he had just made a mistake. Keller pressed on. "Because, he continued, Hollywood is evolving. The old ways of thinking, outdated masculinity, he gestured vaguely, conservative values. A lot of people think it's time to move forward, that guys like you are out of touch with what modern audiences want." There it was. The moment Keller had been waiting for. The setup was perfect. He was on camera, in front of an audience, standing toe-to-toe with a Hollywood legend. He could already picture the headline. Clint Eastwood finally called out. Watch him stumble over his own ignorance. But that headline was about to fall apart. Because Clint Eastwood wasn't the one stumbling. For a second, Eastwood just stared at him. Not with anger, not with offense. Just that slow, steady look that made a man rethink his choices. The silence stretched, drawing in the attention of everyone nearby. Then Eastwood sighed. Not an exhausted sigh, but the kind that signaled complete and utter disinterest. He picked up his drink, took a slow sip, and set it down before finally speaking. "You rehearsed that one, didn't you?" A low chuckle rippled through the crowd. Subtle, but unmistakable. Keller's jaw tightened. "I'm just asking the questions people want answers to," he shot back. Eastwood tilted his head. "People," he repeated, as if tasting the word. "Or just you?" Keller hesitated. That wasn't part of the script in his head. Eastwood leaned in slightly, resting an elbow on the bar. "You think the world moves forward just because some guy with a keyboard says so? That real change happens because someone like you points a finger and says, 'That's old, throw it out.'" Keller opened his mouth, but Eastwood didn't give him the chance. "Let me tell you something, kid," he said, voice steady. The same tone he had used in 100 films to deliver lines that sent chills down audiences' spines. "You don't erase the past just because you don't like it. You learn from it. You build on it. You take what worked, fix what didn't, and move forward. That's progress. Not whatever the hell this is." He mimicked Keller's earlier dismissive hand wave. This time, the chuckle from the crowd was louder. Someone clapped. Keller's face burned red. But he wasn't ready to back down. "With all due respect, Mr. Eastwood," he said, his voice tight, "it's easy for you to talk about learning from the past when your generation had it easier." A murmur ran through the room, and it wasn't in Keller's favor. Eastwood let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Easier?" he repeated, like it was the dumbest thing he had heard all night. "I started in Hollywood when they told actors like me to change their names because they sounded too rough. I worked as a bricklayer before I ever stepped in front of a camera. You think that was easy?" He let the words settle. "Ever had to shovel asphalt in the middle of summer just to afford a meal?" Keller blinked. He hadn't been ready for that. Eastwood took another sip of his drink. "I've seen guys like you before," he said. "Looking for a soundbite, hoping to make a scene. But you came in here thinking I'd fold. That I'd get mad, stumble over my words, maybe even storm off." He shrugged. "I don't do performances on command. That's your job." The laughter was louder this time. Keller felt it, the realization that this wasn't going the way he had planned. And it was about to get worse.